How's it going, folks? Stu here. Scream. It's not just what I do every time I look at myself naked in the mirror. It's also a franchise of horror films. You already know this. We've had 4 Scream films already from the horror icon that is Wes Craven. And it's time to add a 5th one to the pile because, well, they did a 5th one. But is this return to Woodsboro worthwhile? Or would I rather bury my head in the sand? It's the best I've got. Forget that intro joke happened. Scream. It's the new Scream film. And it really bugs me they didn't call it anything other than Scream. Don't call it Scream again. It's just confusing for everyone. Now I got to put Scream brackets 2022 in the title. Annoys me every time I have to do something like that. This one is directed by filmmaking duo Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett, who most recently brought us Ready or Not, which is a film I thought fucking whipped. So I was interested to see what they'd do with a new Scream film, because they seem like they have a very kind of playful, subversive but fun approach to horror films. But on the flip side of that, it's a Scream film, and I was a little bit cautious as to what would happen with a Scream film without Wes Craven's mind and directing behind it. Quick bit of homework before we talk about the new one. For my money, the first Scream, the original one, is just a fucking... I adore that thing. I can watch it over and over and over. Sequels, nothing's ever really captured what was so incredible about the first one, but I've enjoyed them all. The second one, I think, is really good. The third one's the weakest. And the fourth one, which came out in 2011, I actually had a really fun time with and actually think has gotten better. But ultimately, what I love so much about the original Scream, and I guess about the Scream franchise overall, is that they are effective slashers, but also effective sort of meta commentaries on the slasher. And it's just so interestingly done. In that original one, it's so wonderfully done. So Scream 5 comes along, and it's not Wes Craven, and it also happens to be released at a time when we're getting a lot of reboots, or requel, I guess, as this film would like to call them, returns to nostalgic things of the past, right? We've just had Matrix Resurrections, we've had Ghostbusters Afterlife this year. So this Scream film is sort of uniquely placed, I guess, to take on that kind of reboot and remake and sequel culture that there is in cinema at the moment, bringing back things we used to love, bringing back legacy characters that we've seen done a lot of times now, and infuse that into the fun sort of whodunit slasher genre that Scream has pretty much mastered in its own franchise. Has it pulled it off? Sort of. I'm kind of torn about a lot of this film in a way which I was really hoping I wouldn't be. So to keep it brief, this one is essentially a return to Woodsboro again, where Ghostface has popped up with some new characters, but also some old characters are there in the mix as well. Pretty much exactly what you'd expect from a requel in 2022, I guess. And it's a strange one, this one, because it definitely knows that that sort of premise on paper that I've just explained is potentially quite an eye-rolling premise in 2022. But it is also sort of held back by the fact that it is that as well. Am I making sense there? It's like half of it I was like, oh, okay, yeah, you are doing enough to kind of poke fun at yourself enough and do something subversive enough for it to feel like you're doing something fresh here. But the other half of the time, it disappointingly did continuously end up falling back into this kind of trapped feeling where it's like it can't escape the fact that it needs to wink wink nudge nudge itself. But while it's happening, it is undeniably fun. Like, you could definitely tell I'm feeling really conflicted on a lot of stuff about this film, and it's I hate when that happens. I wish I could sit here and be like, it was just a fucking hoot and I loved it. I had fun, but I would be kidding myself if I said that I never felt like I was waiting for it to really sort of click. And I think a lot of that does come down to the fact that we don't have Wes Craven directing behind this all anymore. It's hard to resist this feeling that you're watching someone trying to almost mimic that feeling from the Wes Craven Scream films that feels so effortless there. It feels so sort of endearing and charming in all of the Wes Craven films, even when they're not as good as they could be in the case of films like Scream 3. There is always this kind of charm, I think, to the way it approaches its meta elements and its humor and its wink wink nudge nudginess, which is sort of not really present here, or at least rather comes off to me like an excuse, if that makes much sense. I do like the new sort of generation cast overall. We've got people like Melissa Barrera, Jenny Ortega, Dylan Minnette, Dennis Quaid, Yasmin Savoy Brown, who, side note, she's having a cracking year at the moment between this and Yellow Jackets, and I love her from The Leftovers. I think they're all good enough to serve the story here, but similarly, I also found myself wishing that they all had a bit more of a standout moment or something a little bit more to do, which is, I guess, fine and is almost definitely a part of what this film's trying to do plot-wise and thematically, but can't help but feel a little bit frustrating, especially even coming off the back of Scream 4, the previous one, 10 years ago. There's no one like Kirby in that film, who I thought was a really fun character in there. Emma Roberts in that film as well just felt like a much more interesting and fun character than anyone we really got in this one. And then we've got the returning legacy folks, David Arquette, Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox. I should love what they're doing in this film as a fan of Scream films, but I just sort of felt like none of them ever really did much more than I wanted from, or really much more than we got from them in something like Scream 4. I think ultimately my feelings on the sort of bringing back the legacy characters and weaving in the new generation and old generation is that it doesn't really feel like it earns it as well as it thinks it's earning it. And I don't think it's actually as clever as it thinks it is. Partly because it just keeps hammering home the same stuff over and over, and it can start to get a little bit repetitive and somewhat eye-rolling. It pretty much manages to avoid completely derailing things, and I do think it's fun enough to keep it feeling alive, but it introduces this sort of rules element of this Scream film, which is obviously present in each of them, where they very explicitly go through the rules of the film they're in. It does that in a really fun scene towards the beginning, where you're like, oh, okay, I see what this whole point of this one is. And then it just feels like every time it references those rules again, it's just the same thing over and over, and it is a little bit annoying. And it never really felt like that with the previous one, but it also sort of, I think, comes down to the fact that I feel like a lot of the kind of meta rules of the game here are pretty similar to the stuff that we've seen done in previous ones. It props itself up with a lot of elements that feel very 2022 and very relevant to fan culture at the moment, in a way which feels like it's brushing itself off its shoulder, but it is actually just what it's doing, really. But on the flip side of all of that, I did still find myself getting wrapped up in the mystery of this thing. Like, I did still enjoy watching these characters trying to work out who the killer was, and it does, to its credit, do a lot and enough fun, interesting stuff with the characters trying to work out who it is. There's always this added element with each of the Scream sequels that the characters have had enough experience before that they would start to think about things differently, and I think it explores that quite interestingly, especially in the final act of this film. But I did kind of feel like, I wish you'd done a little bit more with that ending reveal. Like, I wish you'd gone a little bit further in subverting our expectations. And the more I think about it after it, the more things sort of pop out in my head that I'm like, yeah, that isn't really as fun as it seemed like it was in the moment. Yeah, disappointing, but not bad. Weird. I feel like I've just been railing on this thing, right? But I think when you come at a film from a place of disappointment, it can feel a lot like you're harsher on it than you are. I want to be clear, this was fine. I just wanted a lot more from it, and I think it could have done a lot more. I think it comes down to the fact that this one feels like it has the least interesting thing to say. It has the most obvious things to say, I think. It takes some easy shots overall, where I really, really wish it had more balls to do something bigger, something a bit more subversive with itself. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. This film doesn't have the balls it needs to really fly, right? I wish this film had bigger balls. Give me bigger balls, people. I want bigger balls. I want the balls of a film like Malignant. Sorry to keep bringing it up. I just do. I want the balls of a film like Malignant. Please do that, all studio films from here on. But as with all sort of new takes on legacy properties, everyone is going to land in different places on it, I think. Everyone has a different sort of threshold that gets hit or not hit with these things. So in that sense, I'd love to know what you guys thought about Scream 2022. Did it satisfy your cravings? Or should I say cravens? Fuck, that was good, and I really wish I'd done that at the front of the video. It's out on Friday, so let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. We'll have a little chat. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see me talk about more shit, go ahead and click subscribe. That button's down there as well. Also some links to socials, where you can see very silly thoughts from me almost too often. I'll see you guys soon for some more thoughts on more films, but until next time, I'm gonna go and not kill my friends. Someone's gotta do it.